The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all, and welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we'll cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. in the evening until midnight, right here on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, and of course on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ in St. Catharines, Ontario, just down the street from our corporate offices and studios here. And they also stream us on classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. X-Zone Nation, my first guest tonight is a young lady I've had the pleasure of having on the show before. Her name is Cerridwen Fallingstar, and she is a pioneering priestess in the feminist spirituality movement. She's helped ignite in the 1970s. She is a renowned lecturer and teacher of magic and shamanistic spiritual development classes. She has appeared on programs ranging from AMLA, Morning Show, Oprah Channel, Time Magazine, Reader's Digest, CNN, and a National Geographic special. Joining me now from San Geronimo in California is my guest this hour, Cerridwen Fallingstar. And Cerridwen, welcome back to the X Zone. Great having you with us again.
Wonderful to be back, Rob. It's great to see you.
What have you been up to? You know, you're one of the busiest ladies I know.
Well, my latest book has come out called Rocket in My Pocket. So this is a humor memoir of kind of my life as a pagan priestess and some of the funnier things that have gone on, and also starting really in my childhood where, you know, my father was a rocket scientist. He designed the space rockets during the space race. He designed that first big spy in the sky satellite that took pictures of Soviet installations.
My goodness.
So I grew up very much in the Cold War, the belly of the beast of the Cold War, where they were very much hoping to go to the moon. And then, of course, I, as a priestess, started drawing down the moon and having a somewhat different lunar relationship than my father did. It's kind of a heartbreaking time for me right now because my father was a very loyal Republican back in the days where they were Eisenhower Republicans, and you could be a decent person and be a Republican. And if he could see now the party that he loved, you know, kowtowing to Putin,
Yeah.
and well, more than flirting with fascism, you know, really, really trying to replace democracy with oligarchy and fascism, well, he would just roll over in his grave. I'm glad he's not here to see it.
These are very trying times for many people, not just in the United States or up here in Canada, but right around the world. We have the president going after the European Union. He wants to take over Greenland, Ellesmere Island. He wants to make Canada the 51st state. He's going to be going into the Panama Canal. He's looking at making the Gaza Strip into the Club Med of the Middle East, and it seems that nobody's able to stop this man.
Well, you know, I think there is process. You know, there's progress. You know, the Democrats are trying various things. The judges are, you know, issuing restraining orders pretty much as quickly as he can try and make a bad plan. The judiciary is, for the most part, doing their job, trying to stop him. And this is where we'll find out, you know, how well our checks and balances work. But since the Republicans right now control both the House and the Senate, although by very slim margins, the Democrats, for instance, will not be able to get enough votes to impeach and get him, say, arrested. I don't think it can. I hope it could work that way, but unless some of the Republicans come to their senses, which doesn't look like they are right now. But, something you can do, even if you're not a citizen of the United States, you also can call, the representatives and senators of our country and tell them how you feel as, say, a citizen of Canada or wherever you are in the world, that you feel that your security is being undermined, and that, the Pax Americana, for all its faults, does need to last, that the keeping of peace, we've had a fairly peaceful time of it in this world for a while. Exceptions, of course, in all the places we know about, but overall, people have been moving in a more peaceful direction, and we need that to keep going.
I've been speaking to a number of my friends down in the U.S., and it seems that the business people, the industrialists, the consumers can all read the writing on the wall that this isn't something that is just going to be hard on Canada or the other nations that he is hitting with tariffs, but it's also going to be very hard on the American families.
Yeah.
It's going to cost more. Everything is going to increase.
That's what I'm hoping, is that enough of the rich people who don't want the stock market to go down, who don't want tariffs to cut into their profits, hopefully enough of the rich people will start pressuring the Republicans and pressuring Trump to let go of some of his more stupid ideas. Well, they're all stupid ideas. Let go of the economically stupid ideas. And he's already backed off the tariffs quite a bit, and I don't think that the tariff idea is going to stand. I think the rich people will have something to say about that, and those are the people he will listen to.
I have never seen a president spend so much time in front of a camera, having all this media attention in the Oval Office, and signing executive order after executive order after executive order. Is this common practice for a sitting president?
Never been done before. No, it's completely different. I mean, you got to remember, Trump is not a politician. He was a TV guy, and that's what he knows, and is how to impress people visually and with his voice tones. He doesn't know anything about the subject of politics, and they're also doing this as a way of trying to overwhelm us, make us feel like, oh my God, it's hopeless, because every time you try and put out a fire over here, they've lit another fire over there. So we have to be very, really standing up during this period to show them that we're not rolling over. We're not impressed with this sheer number of proclamations. He's not a king who can issue these proclamations.
Right. As we've seen throughout history, a lot of diversionary tactics are used, whether it's psychological war, whether it's trade war, financial, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And every President Trump has everybody watching his right hand. He keeps on bringing the attention to the right hand, whether he's calling the Prime Minister of Canada the governor of his 51st state, or he's digging into the very meat of the issues in his own corrupt and weird way. But nobody's watching his left hand. And I think that we need to start taking our eyes off of the right to see what the left is doing.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk is the left. He's been given the permission to just go and access the treasury. This has never happened before. There's never been this kind of a person who doesn't even have security clearance, who's never been elected or appointed to anything, since Trump doesn't actually have the power to appoint him or to create a new part of the government without help from. It has to pass Congress. Sure. And it might pass Congress, but he's not trying to do that. He's just he's launching a coup. So he promised that was what he was going to do. And sure enough, that's what he's doing. And we just have to fight it on every level. I hope we won't have to fight it at some point with guns, but right now we're trying to fight it through the courts and through talking to our representatives and protests.
I was talking to a friend of mine who is a former high-ranking officer in the Canadian military, and he was part of the Canadian Armed Forces that was with NATO, a representative of Canada in NATO. And I said, what happens if the president of the United States decides to use military action to try and take over Canada. And then he said, well, this is when I think it's Section 5 kicks in, that if one member of NATO is attacked, they're all attacked. But I said, the United States is still a member of NATO. So how would this work? And apparently, from what I gathered, this is a very, very serious question because this has never happened before. So we'll just have to see what happens. And I think that if we stick together, you, myself, and the other people who understand what is going on, that there can be a way to successfully come out of this.
Yeah, I think, as you said, he's kind of wanting you to watch the scary thing of, oh my God, is he going to attack Canada? Well, really, he just wants to loot the United States Treasury, right? Really, it's just about getting money for himself and the other oligarchs who already have far more money than they could ever spend, and it's, I mean, it does make you wonder just how insecure about their cocks they really are. I mean, granted, yes, no one would have sex with them without lots of money being involved, but they have enough money to pay for sex, so maybe they could relax, right? It's amazing.
Cerridwen, we have to take our first break right now, but when we come back, I'd like to talk to you about witchcraft, paganism, and human consciousness, because I really believe that all this plays into these trying days that we're seeing. And Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, visit our website, theheartofthefire.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerridwen Fallingstar. That's CERRIDWEN Fallingstar. And we'll both be back on the other side of this break as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Welcome back, everyone. Cerridwen Fallingstar is our special guest. And Cerridwen, how did you get involved into Wicca or witchcraft and become a priestess?
Well, it was definitely kind of a swerve, as I was saying. My father was a rocket scientist when I was growing up, so religion was the opiate of the masses. It wasn't something anyone that people like our family was involved with. When I was 22, I was working as a journalist, and my editor walked in the room and said, "There's a witch on trial for fortune telling." This is in 1975, Los Angeles. I was like, "Ooh, I'll take that story." So that was my introduction. I went to the 4-day trial of the witch who was on trial for fortune telling, and by the end of it, I was pretty darned curious about the whole thing. I mean, I thought all the witches were dead, right? I thought they'd been killed off, back in the Middle Ages, and it was quite a surprise to me to find out that they were still operating and meeting in groups in 1975 Los Angeles. So I started attending those rituals, and I fell in love with it.
What was the basis of the charge for this witch who was?
Well, there was a there was a law on the books at the time from the 1880s, but it had never been taken off the books, saying that fortune telling was illegal, except that no one was allowed to predict the future except for ministers. I guess so they could tell you were going to hell or something like that.
Yeah, I guess so.
But in any case, she no one had complained about her. An undercover policewoman showed up and got a reading from her, and then arrested her after giving the reading. And this was very shortly after the woman, the witch's name was Budapest, had applied for ministerial status for witches. So there was a thought that that the government was trying to shut that down before it's got going. But then many witches from all over the country came to her side and all worked together to make a group that would be a legal organization, where if you were then a part of that legal organization, you could become a minister, you could perform weddings, you could predict the future, or do whatever else ministers were licensed to do. And
Geez, I wonder if anybody saw what was going to happen with President Trump in power.
If anyone saw what?
If any of the psychics that are out there, if they saw what was going to happen.
Well, you didn't have to be too much of a psychic. Trump was saying that you were never going to have to vote again if you voted him in.
Oh,
he's been coming right out and saying what he's going to do. All you had to do is believe that he was serious, which unfortunately he is. So
here you were, you went to the trial, you did the reporting on it, you were very interested in what was going on. excuse me. How did you? What did you do from then? Did you take courses? Did you read books?
Yeah,
Did
you know,
you join a coven?
I studied with her. I started working with her coven. Started reading what few books were out. There wasn't so much in 1975, really.
Right.
Um, but you know what I could find, I was reading everything I could find, and then I started my own coven, and we started experimenting with consciousness and seeing what we could do. How we could do trance journeys into other realities, and teach ourselves how to read fortunes and cards and things of that nature, and how to do seasonal rituals. And we just started really science says they don't know what a good 50% of the brain is for, and witches are very interested in that 50%. We really want to know, what can we, let's play around in here. It's not,
Right.
what we're doing is not irrational. It's irrational. It's in the zone that doesn't happen to be rational, but which has its own ways of working. It's the right side of the brain, which our culture doesn't tend to use very much. So it's figuring out how to operate the right and left sides of your brain together, hopefully, is what we're up to.
So, is there a difference between the witchcraft that is practiced today and the witchcraft that was practiced in the olden days? And is it witchcraft? Is it Wicca? Is it all part of paganism? How does it all work?
Paganism is like the bigger name. Like you would have Christianity, and under Christianity there would be Catholic, Presbyterian, Baptist. Different flavors of Christianity. So in that same way, paganism is the big umbrella term, and Wicca, or any of the other smaller subgroups would be underneath that. Witchcraft can apply to Wicca is very more specifically Celtic European witchcraft. Comes from the root word Wicca, same as for wicker, from the willow that bends with the wind. So meaning you can move with the flow of things. So that's where that term Wicca comes from, and witchcraft from that term. But there are people, Afro-Caribbean people who practice witchcraft. There are people from all over the world who might practice something they call witchcraft. Now we don't really know for sure. Because there was a 300-year period of time in Europe where witches were being burned, we don't really know very much about what did people actually practice back in those days. Modern witchcraft is a recreation. It's something that we have. A witch teacher friend of mine said, I practice witchcraft exactly the way my ancestors did 60,000 years ago. I make it up. and that's the truth, is we are making up a tradition as we go along, which is kind of beneficial in a way, because we aren't really stuck in, say, some past practices that don't really fit anymore. We can adjust it to work within modern consciousness and modern society.
How are you and the other members of the witch covens that are around the United States and around the world? What are you doing in the U.S. under the current political conditions that you and I have been talking about?
Well, most of us are doing, active political work, calling our senators and representatives and writing letters and things like that. Certainly I think there will probably be a lot of magical actions going along with that. I thought something that was very interesting was you see how there was a Christian bishop who presided over Trump's inauguration, asking him to have mercy on immigrants and other people. And you see that immediately after that, leading Christians all called her a witch. This is a Christian bishop. And they immediately started calling her a witch because she was a powerful woman who was saying something that a powerful man didn't want to hear.
And you also pointed out that during the inauguration, Trump didn't have his hand on the Bible.
Right. It's like I'm kind of surprised that the Christians haven't taken a little more note of that for the first time ever, a president being sworn in did not put his hand upon the Bible. And so, for people who say, well, he's the Antichrist, it's like, well, there's your proof. I mean, he doesn't even want to touch the thing.
Right.
If you're one of the Christians who voted for him, I would be getting a little worried right about now that maybe you got sold down the river, and things aren't going to be so pretty for you either.
Interesting times, to say the very least. In your new book, Rocket in My Pocket, you introduce us to your father, who was an engineer, designing rockets during the space race of the 1960s. How did this? How did you progress from an intensely radical upbringing to being more of a mystical life?
Mhm. Well, in some ways, it wasn't as big of a shift as you might think. My father took us on long camping trips, my father and mother. But it was my father who was running the engine on that, of driving us all around the country, and we would camp out everywhere. This was a great time to be camping. You really only had people in the woods who wanted to be in the woods. People didn't bring their TVs or any of that stuff. And, we saw bears and mountain lions and, bighorn sheep and, all the wildlife. And he would take us, we'd be out in the middle of some beautiful forest, and he'd open his arms and say, why would anyone go to church when they could go be with the trees? And
Wow.
so he had a fairly paganish viewpoint, even if he might not have. And in fact, when we moved to upstate New York, because he was working then with, he was doing a top secret thing, which I didn't find out about till much later, with Eastman Kodak to make that first big spy in the sky satellite. So when we moved up there, all the teenagers were coming up to me. I was 14 years old, and the teenagers would come up and say, "Oh, what church does your family go to?" And I'd be like, "What church?" I mean, I didn't grow up with any church. And I went home and said, "The kids all want to know what church we go to." And he said, "Tell them we're pagans, honey. Tell them we worship the trees." I was like, "Oh, that's going to go over really well." But now I can say, "Yeah, we're pagans. I worship the trees." You got that one right, Dad. So in some ways, it was, while he prided himself as an entirely rational person, he was also an extremely psychic person. And
Right.
that's, I think, one way he was able to make these leaps of consciousness that enabled him to invent the things that he invented, was that his brain worked in these kind of psychic leaps. He frequently would see the future or dream about the future. And then after it happened, he would always say, "Well, it's just a coincidence." I'd be like, well, that's a heck of a coincidence. There was a time where he dreamed that one of his kids, and he didn't remember which one, was getting off the school bus, holding something in their hands, and the wind blew it around the front of the bus. And the kid ran after it and was hit by a truck and killed.
Ooh.
So he was shaken up enough about that. So he talked to us at breakfast that day, said, "Hey, I certainly hope none of you are stupid enough to do that."
Right.
And we all said, "No, we're not." And then, my sister was coming home, the next day, I think, in the afternoon. She had a picture she was very proud of in her hands that she had painted. The wind took it around the front of the school bus. She ran around following it. She remembered my father's dream and stopped. And the truck blazed by and left a tire print on the painting.
Wow.
And then when she came, told everyone about that at dinner, my father said, "Well, it's just a coincidence, but I hope you've all learned a valuable lesson." And I was like, "Whoa, well, that's a heck of a coincidence." By that time, I knew that I myself had a fair amount of psychic ability, and I could see where I got it from, but it was off limits as a topic, something we did not discuss.
But I would imagine everybody listened to Dad at breakfast to see how the rest of the day was going to go.
Yeah. I mean, if he said, "Watch out for something," we were like, "Okay, fine." We definitely tended to pay attention. It didn't happen often that he would give a warning like that, but if he did, you were like, "Okay, we won't go out tonight if you think you have a bad feeling about it. That's fine."
Cerridwen, why do you think that history was so harsh and so cruel to witches and those who wanted to be pagans?
Mhm. Well, it's, they say the winners write the history books, and, the Christians, won. They killed enough of the pagans and the witches, and to the point where
Mhm.
they were virtually wiped out in Europe, although they also, committed vast crimes against the native people of, North America, Central America, South America, everywhere Christians went, they created, chaos and havoc and disaster. Africa too, amongst all the pagan communities they came into contact with and forcibly converted. So, it's just like, imagine if Hitler had won World War II, when somebody mentions the Jews, you're going to be like, "Oh, yeah, they were poisoning the wells and, killing Christian babies and using their blood to make matzah." Everyone knows that. Because if Hitler had won the war, that's what you would see in your history books. The good thing they got rid of those Jews. So
They were
unfortunately,
horrific times, yeah.
people are scapegoated. And then, if the winners are writing the story, of course, some of us also talk about whether which hurt us more, Inquisition or Hollywood, because Hollywood has certainly gone along up until recently. You see a lot more pro-witch things now, though. It's really started to shift where you see all sorts of very pro-witch and psychic material on all the different channels and movies and things like that. So there has been a good shift there.
Do you think that the change of the mentality within different religious philosophies have also played a major part on how Wicca and witches are looked at now compared to when they were during the earlier days when, in my opinion, it was a way of maintaining control over the people, that there's only one religion, it's my way or the highway, and if you don't like the highway, well, we'll just burn you at the stake. Yeah.
It was a way of intimidating people. Also, the other thing that was driving the Inquisition was the plague, the Black Plague. Many more men than women died during the plague, probably because they were tending animals and so more likely to be bitten by fleas, et cetera, and so forth. So you got lots of women who suddenly you have women weavers, and you have women merchants, you have women who have taken over their husbands' professions. You have women with money and status and power. And that was very threatening then to the church at the time. And so the war against witches was very much a war against women. And you see that coming up again in my country right now, where the Project 2025 wants to take away women's right to vote. And they state that right up front, that they plan to take away women's right to vote. And they're actually floating right now the idea that if your current name is different than the name on your birth certificate, you will not be allowed to vote. Now, who does that mostly affect? Mostly women who've changed their names to their married names, to their husband's names. So it's a way of trying to, they really want to get us back barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. They are really very threatened by the progress women have made.
I have found out throughout the years, I love history. I truly love history because if you're smart enough to look at it and understand that it does repeat itself, and you and I were talking about this when it came to the similarities between President Trump and Adolf Hitler, that looking at all this, how much play does history actually have in the control, not only of women, but the control of the different religious philosophies that were founded by women? And in my opinion, any country that has had a woman at the helm, like the Queen and Margaret Thatcher and so on, that country has prospered because women think before they act. And my wife will tell you that. That's why she got me a GPS as soon as they became available, so I didn't have to worry about reading maps anymore.
Yeah.
But history is proving itself that women have what it takes, and I, for one, am very happy to see that the world is looking at women not only as mother figures, but people who actually, like I said, think before they act. And that is why it's Mother Earth and not Father Earth. Can you just imagine Father Earth? Oh my God. Talk about a havoc. You and I have got to take our commercial break at the bottom of the hour, so please stand by. Exonation, if you'd like to find out more information about our guest this hour and the books she has written, visit her website, theheartofthefire.com. And we'll be back as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios here in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And strange days, and I know that we're going to be talking about these days for years to come. We'll be back on the other side of this breakdown. And welcome back, everyone. Cerridwen Fallingstar is our special guest this hour. And if you'd like to find out more about her, visit her website, theheartofthefire.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerridwen Fallingstar. You've written 3 books, I believe, all told.
5, actually.
5 now. Wow.
Yeah, 5.
And what's it like to be an author in today's world where there is so much information out there? How do you keep up with the competition?
Well, it's very challenging. publishing industry has been struggling for a while, and it's very challenging. But in many ways, I don't, I'm happy that so much when I first got involved in witchcraft in 1975, it was very small, very niche. You knew, if you didn't know everybody, you knew somebody who knew them. And now, we're the fastest growing religion in the United States, and we've got over 1 million people, and so it's actually, I don't really think of it as the competition when people are writing the kind of books that I'm writing. They think of it as, this is fantastic. We are getting to be known. We are getting to be known as an alternative, that people are hungry, thirsty, very much wanting something spiritual, but they don't necessarily want to give up their intelligence to have it. And, old school religion is very much, well, you just have to listen to, the minister will tell you, the priest will tell you, don't ask questions.
Yeah.
That for many of us, that just won't work. We need to be able to ask questions. We need to be able to be our own authority and not necessarily just listen to someone else who says they're the authority. So I think it's a pretty great thing, actually, that there is so much out there to be read.
What do you think has been the catalyst in the movement of Wicca from being a very small organization to where it's actually giving the other established religious philosophy a good run for their money?
Right, like where I live, there's definitely a lot more pagans than Christians at this point. In Marin County, California, I think, and of course lots of Buddhists too. But
Yeah.
there's not a lot of the traditional religions are somewhat struggling. The traditional Christian religions are struggling. I think it's two different things. It's feminism. That women started saying, hey, how can you have a religion that just has a male god and no goddess?
Exactly.
Does that make any sense? How could this possibly be a good thing? To be leaving half of the population out of the sacred, and to say that group is not as sacred. That doesn't make any sense. We're the ones who give birth. We're the ones who give life. So there's that, and then there's also the environmental movement of people becoming more aware of that this earth is, this is not a stage that we're walking around and pontificating on, that the earth is us and we are the earth, and that we cannot thrive or survive, without a healthy planet. And witchcraft and all kinds of paganism, that's the whole focus, is the planet as sacred, the earth as a living embodiment of the goddess, and the god, the earth, as sacred. And that, I think, also draws people. People say, oh, I want something that makes sense to me in terms of, I walk out and I see a sunset and I feel like,
exactly.
I'm having a spiritual experience.
Exactly.
And that nobody's mediating it. Nobody's telling you what to do. You have to read a book. It's there. The book of nature is there. And that we want to, feel that and interpret for ourselves. Oh, how can I be in right relationship with this?
Everything is so simple in life. We complicate it. And if we would just get back to our core beliefs, our core values, this would be one heck of a better place. And I think that the amount of information that we're being force-fed each and every day, 724, 365, is more damaging than we realize right now. And I believe that this has been one of the major factors when schools are saying, all right, listen, you come to school to learn. You don't come to school to play with your iPhone, or you need to do these things, because God forbid, when the power goes out, what are you going to do without a cell phone, without your access to the internet? My grandson came over one day and he said to my wife, Nana, can you teach me how to write? Because they don't teach cursive writing anymore in school.
Right. Yeah. It's very much changing what we'll need to.
Yeah.
But again, then you see, who's behind this coup that's happening in my country? It's the tech bros. Musk and his tech guys are looking to possibly crash, all our computer systems on which we desperately depend, and that's where they're going. That's the jugular, of our current culture is the world of the computer.
I understand that you've had a past life experience.
I have many past life memories. I
Can
started
you
actually
share them
having them
with
when I
us?
was a kid. So that was interesting. I started when I was like 3. I remember, saying to my mother, "Oh, I'm so glad we're rich now." And she said, "Oh, honey, we're not rich." I said, yes, we are. We meet every day. And we have rug on the floor instead of dirt. And I went and turned on the bath and I said, hot water whenever we want it. We're rich. As we didn't have a television. We didn't, I couldn't read yet, but I remembered, walking a long way and pulling water out of a hole in the ground, called a well,
Right.
and being in a dirt floor place and being cold and hungry. And so I've always had that access. And that's something, my first 3 books are all historical novels written from my past lives. The Heart of the Fire is about witchcraft in 16th century Scotland. And then the White as Bone, Red as Blood series is set in 12th century Japan. Then my last 2 books are memoirs from this life, but you could call the other ones past life memoirs, really. So I've also had a long-term practice of taking other people on past life journeys. And I think it can be very, very interesting. You can use it to solve trauma, but also you can go back to your happier past lives and re-experience the power that you had then. And I'm not talking about power over other people. I'm talking about power from within, actually being in consonance with your deepest self, actually fulfilling your destiny, providing value to the people around you, those experiences of empowerment. So it's a very useful technique to add to your own power in this life.
As a pagan and as a priestess, when you're talking to people, how do you explain to them, or kind of message do you give them that they understand the importance of healing our planet, and that we just can't pull out of the Paris Accord. We just can't do whatever we want to ignore an issue that's there because we're part of the problem.
Right.
How do you address that issue?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was in a group that was, lots of different religious leaders from different traditions coming together and talking. And the Episcopalian that I was, chatting with said, they had asked an interesting question in the National Episcopalian magazine, where they asked people, if you thought you were going to be reincarnated and come back in another life, would you be more inclined to take care of the planet? And 85% of them said yes. That just shows again how important it is to have, if you believe that you're going to come back to this mess, you don't want to leave a big mess. It's like, if you realize that this is indeed what you're going to be dealing with in your next life, then you're going to want to, not just leave a better world for our children. You'd think that would be enough motivation. It's certainly enough for me to want to leave a better world for my son and my grandchildren. Yeah. But that, unfortunately, much of the traditional Christian beliefs, and I know there's many Christians who are turning away from this now, but traditionally it has been very much about, well, this is a sinful world. It's not a good place. You just want to die and go to heaven and forget all about it. And that that God put the earth here for us to just use. This is just stuff this is stuff for us to enjoy, to play with. We don't have to take care of it. So I think those messages have really caused us to be in the crisis type situation. We are now, the oppression of women, how women are generally, if women are able to control their birth rate, they will not have more children than they can feed. Generally they will not do that. But when they are being prevented from having birth control, prevented from having abortions, then you get the overpopulation situation that we have right now, which is destroying our planet. There are simply too many people trying to inhabit this one very small space. And there's really no settlement on Mars in the future, whatever Elon Musk thinks. That's not going to be happening anytime soon. So
yeah, I agree with you 100%. And a lot of the different organizations that are out in the world today trying their very best to get the message across that this is our problem. We need to get on board. We need to work with nature, not against nature, because this is a very real problem, and it's not going to be solved unless we all work together. Very few people know this, but some of the top organizations that are working towards making this planet a better place, including Greenpeace, they're all pagans.
Yeah, a lot of them are. When I first got involved in paganism, what I was really shocked about was how I kept meeting physicists.
Mhm.
I was like, wait a minute, the physicists are all pagan? Well, they believe a lot more crazy stuff than I do, I have to admit. The physicists are really out there, you know. But yeah, it's an interesting to see, you know, who kind of resonates and starts, you know, moving in this direction.
In your opinion, what has been the most influential lesson that you've learned over the years that you've been working as one of the many people who
Mhm.
are trying to clean up the mess that our past has left us?
Well, certainly some of, you know, what keeps me interested in the pagan path is just the number of absolutely wild experiences I've had that kind of go outside maybe my ability to explain. For instance, you know, when one of my books I talk about that we were doing a ritual at the beach at night and we cast a circle in the sand, and then the tide started coming in and the tide started going around our circle, and it went all the way around and touched in the back, and we were like, oh, whoa, this is crazy. How can the ocean be, you know, actually delineating our circle? So then we released the circle, and then the next wave came in and just swept everything off the altar. And you know, we should have picked up everything before we dismissed. But you know, something like that, or something like I cast a circle and a bear walks out of the woods and walks around the circle, and then off in another direction. You know, these kind of things where it's like, okay, wow, this is getting kind of out there. This is really interesting. Or when I see the future for myself or someone else, and then it just comes to pass the way I've seen it. I'm like, well, how does this work? Obviously, it works. There's some part of the brain that could do this.
Yes.
We just don't know very much about that part of the brain. We don't really understand the interactions often between ourselves and nature, and they take on this miraculous quality.
If there are people out there right now listening to us and the experiences that you've had and the work that you're doing, and I thank you for the work that you do in trying to get the message across about how we're all part of the solution, because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. How can someone listening who wants to learn more about this, besides going to your website, how would somebody find a good teacher, a good mentor when it comes
Yeah.
to
Well,
paganism?
you kind of have to look around, you know, kind of
Mm,
certainly with computers. That's one thing. It's a lot easier to figure out who's in your area,
right.
and to go, you know, check them out. If they've written books, obviously check out their books. You know, go show up, do some ritual, see if it feels good. It might be very important to find. There's something called the Isaac Bonowitz Cult Danger Evaluation Frame. I recommend looking that up. Look up you know, how you can identify a cult in case you should run across someone who's trying to manipulate you. It will give you that and get that information about what are the suspicious signs. A lack of humor, for instance. You know, if people don't laugh,
Yeah.
that's usually a bad sign. If the leader is assumed to be all powerful and all knowing, also a very bad sign. If you can't question the leader, not a good. This is when you want to run for the door. There's not a lot of witches per se who are operating in this cult-like manner, but there are a lot of culty people of one sort or another. So you just have to be careful. Try and go with a friend and compare notes. You know, see what you can do to figure it out. And if it feels scary or wrong, you know, maybe back off. But also be aware that actual spiritual growth is often going to feel very scary too, and psychological growth too. You know, that you go into therapy, you're going to spend a lot of time being scared because you're going to have to shift a lot of things that you believed. And
Exactly.
the same with any kind of mystical work.
Mhm.
My second coven called themselves the Holy Terrors, because we recognize that there is a kind of fear that means, you know, most fear usually means run in the other direction. But
Right.
there is a kind of fear that says, oh, well, if I keep going this way, nothing's ever going to be the same. I'm not going to be able to go back. And that's the terror that you want to step into and say, yeah, what's next?
My final question for you tonight is: your dad was a bona fide or real rocket scientist.
Yep.
What do you think your father would think of Elon Musk and his ambitions, including the ambition to get to the Mars?
Oh, I'm sure he too would have been very excited about getting to Mars, but he would not have approved of, destroying people's lives on Earth to try and do it, or destroying the planet that we can depend on, the planet that does sustain life, in order to try and get to one that probably isn't going to sustain life at any point, and certainly not within any of our lifetimes is that going to happen. So, he would have felt that desire, the excitement that, hey, let's see if we can do it. But he certainly would not have approved of robbing the treasury in order to do it.
Well said. What are your final thoughts for the Exo Nation? We've got about 60 seconds. What would you like to share? What's your final message?
Well, I really hope that we all can, keep feeling strong. That yes, these are very challenging times.
Mm-hmm.
Just breathe one step at a time. Do a bunch of work one day, take the next day off. We can't be slamming day after day after day. You have to pace yourself. We're in it to win it. Go for the long. We got to go for the long haul, and don't be afraid. It's like, we're all going to die. It's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Live your life fully while you're here. Live it fully, and give everything you have to give while you're here.
Good friend of mine in Montreal said, "We're here for a good time, not for a long time."
Yeah, exactly.
Cerridwen, thank you ever so much for joining us tonight. I wish you continued success. Please come back and visit us anytime. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, visit www.theheartofthefire.com. Take care of yourself, Cerridwen.
Thank you so much, Rob. It is always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much for being you, and thank you for the great work you've done over the years and continue to. I'll be back on the other side of this break, Exo Nation, as hour number 2 of tonight's show starts right now.